I wanted to give a follow-up video to my Ancient Egypt haul I posted on Instagram at the beginning of last semester and review some of my very favorite things we used in our Ancient Egypt study this year. So the first thing that I absolutely loved, probably the most out of everything that I got, was this Treasury of Egyptian Mythology. It may have been one of the more pricey things that I bought in the unit study, but it is so worth it because it has beautiful illustrations and wonderful retellings of the ancient Egyptian mythology, talking about their creation story and their gods and goddesses and their stories that my boys were completely just enraptured at hearing. One of the main texts that we used for information was the Usborne internet-linked Encyclopedia of the Ancient World, and I bought that through an Usborne rep like 1,000 years ago. But it was really fun because I had this as assigned reading for my oldest child, and he was able to learn so much more and so much more in depth than I was able to cover with the little boys in tow. One of our main texts, our spine, was actually the story of the world, which everybody knows about that one by now, I'm sure. But we listen to that when we're doing morning time basket or when the boys are playing Legos, sometimes when we're riding in the car. And it covers like the whole story of ancient history. Well, I mean, obviously nothing can do that, but it gives a pretty good idea of the story of the ancient world from different parts of the world, going into depth on details and stories and myths and things for other units that we're not going to cover as in-depth as we did with the Ancient Egypt unit. So I really liked having that for them so that we cover like ancient Mesopotamia, for example, that we're not going to do a unit on. So after that, we started going into more depth on certain subjects within the ancient Egypt, right? And so one of the subjects we covered was King Tut and his mummy. And so this book right here, King Tut's Mummy, Lost and Found, is a really great retelling of the story of how they found his tomb and everything in it, and has cool pictures and then simple text. So even some of my younger kids can read this book on their own, which was really fun. I had them paint a copy of his mask and then read a little bit more about it with this really cool printable from Fiddlesticks Education on Etsy. So that was kind of a fun unit. Another one we loved was taking inspiration from Story of the World, where we studied ancient texts, pre-Egyptian text, and they carved it into clay to see what that was like. And then we started studying hieroglyphics. So my favorite activity we did with the hieroglyphics, well, the boys' favorite, I think, was the stamps that came with this book here, Fun with Hieroglyphics, from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which was just crammed full of information about hieroglyphics, more than you would ever even want to know, but it was a really, really cool resource to have. And so the boys stamped those hieroglyphics while we listened to music from ancient Egypt, which was a fun experience. Another time we took this simple key here, and we practiced writing on papyrus, which was the paper from ancient Egypt, and talked about how they sourced paper and stone, and that's how we know so much about them now. They even made a cute little cartouche necklace. So the boys loved learning about the Rosetta Stone and how we were able to recover the ancient hieroglyphic language. They really got into the idea of archaeology, which was fun because I had these beautiful pictures of the Rosetta Stone and Queen Nefertiti and many other ancient artifacts and monuments that we got from simplycharlottemason.com, and then used kind of like a picture study in our morning basket, where we would show them the picture and talk about it and talk about what we noticed, and then we would hang them up on our wall as reminders throughout the week. And then we would point to them and tell our grandparents about them, or our friends that stopped by, or our dad at dinner. And so they were able to kind of review the information, which was really a lot of fun. I think the favorite read aloud the boys had was The Boy of the Pyramids, A Mystery in Ancient Egypt, and they loved it because it is a true living book. I also got this at simplycharlottemason.com, and it was really immersive and showed them what it was like to be in one of the more royal classes in ancient Egypt at the time that they were building the pyramids. Another time I had them paint this cute little scarab here as we studied about the ancient burial rituals inside the pyramids. Now, what was really cool about that, which is not pictured, was when we were studying the ancient pyramids, I had them build a pyramid out of sugar cubes. You could also do it with Legos, and it had a really fun crossover with our Simple Machines unit as we were studying inclined planes. So I will post more about that another time. But the boys absolutely loved that. The sugar cube pyramids obviously did not last because they're sugar cubes, and I have 3 little boys. But it was a really fun activity nonetheless. Another thing that didn't last was our Salto Maps. But that was a fun build for them after we studied using some of our bigger maps we have of Africa and pointed out the Nile and which direction it flows and used that as well. So in addition to that, we went through our subscription of Letters from Afar and pulled out everything that had to do with Egypt and read those, which was another really fun, immersive, living book, but it's not a book, like living text for the boys to go through and see what it would be like to visit ancient Egypt, which was a ton of fun. And then my little boys really enjoyed Bill and Pete Down the Nile, which was just a fun, playful book about going down the Nile in ancient Egypt, or modern day Egypt, actually. But it's just a fun read aloud, and this one's purely for fun, but I'm still going to recommend it because it was one of the favorites we had while we were doing this unit. Another thing that we did not have pictured was our timelines of ancient history, which help kind of pull it all together and give it context of how this history happened over thousands of years, because we're going to have to rewind a little bit when we start talking about some of the other civilizations. This game here, Match a Mummy, was a hit, even with my older boys, which I was surprised because I thought it was just going to be a matching game, and I was a little nervous about like spending the money on it, if it would be worth it. But it actually did teach them quite a bit about ancient Egypt, and there were different levels of play, so even my older boys loved playing that game. I think the last thing here I have on the table is this book here, and I was hesitant to even tell you about it because I'm pretty sure it's out of print. We got a very well-loved version ourselves, but these poems about ancient Egypt, which was recommended by How We School on Instagram, was a really, really, really fun resource because it helped them memorize different information about ancient Egypt, but made it fun because it's poetry, and kids love poetry. So that is my review from our Ancient Egypt unit. I hope you have found it helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.